Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm really excited about today's discussion. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. For those of you who don't know me, which is probably most of you, I'm the CMO here at Dreamit. Dreamit is an early stage startup accelerator that works in both education, technology, and digital health. We work specifically with companies who've raised some money and are on their way towards raising their Series A round. We've been doing acceleration for more than 8 years. We've accelerated more than 280 companies to date, and one of the first accelerators founded. Today's discussion, as I was chatting about with the panelists a few minutes ago, is probably the hottest topic asked about by founders within the cohort. It seems to fall outside of the normal realm of expertise, which is why I think today's panel is going to go tremendously well. And that is all about PR and communications and getting your startup noticed in the media. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce at a very high level the panelists who are joining us today, but I'm going to let them do that themselves so they can tell you a little bit about themselves and who they are. Cari, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Cari Sommer. I run Sommer Communications Group. We're a boutique communications and PR firm. We work with growth stage tech companies and venture capital firms here in New York and Silicon Valley. Reza?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Reza Chowdhury. I'm the founder and CEO of AlleyWatch. It's a publication focused on the startup ecosystem in New York. It's probably important to describe sort of the blend of content that we have on our site. So we're really interested in a lot of life cycle events in startups. So fundings, foundings, exits, launches. It's mixed in with coverage of what's happening in the local ecosystem, in addition to having some sort of thought leadership around topics that are of interest to the entrepreneurial and venture community. Randy?
Thank you, Reza. Hi, I'm Randy Brandoff. I'm the founder and CEO of 11 James. After a brief stint in venture capital, I've been a luxury drug dealer for about 20 years now at Marquis Jet, NetJets, Avion, and then 11 James. 11 James is evolving the luxury collaborative model with access to watches. It's an annual membership, and it's an awful lot of fun. And I'm excited to talk about today's topic. And thanks for having me, Dream.
Alex, I don't know if your video looks frozen. You may be having some technical difficulties. If you're there. Okay, no worries. We'll move on with this.
Mic is off.
Your mic is off and your video is frozen. Hopefully you can jump in on this once we get those technical difficulties squared away. So as I mentioned, today's discussion is all about PR and attracting media. As most startups know, first mover advantage is a very big deal. But being able to gain mass awareness for your brand, gain mass awareness for you as a founder, and get the attention of the media is a tremendous way of differentiating yourself from the rest of the pack, even if you don't have that first mover advantage. So, Randy, if it's okay, I'm going to start by directing this at you, and hopefully this just spawns into lots of very interesting conversation. And full transparency, I know Randy for a very, very long time. I've seen him build several brands over the years. He's got an amazing track record of consistent coverage in publications like CNN, CNBC, Business Insider, et cetera. So I'd love it if you can start us off talking a little bit about the process for getting that kind of press. And by that, I mean, are there building blocks that these founders need to have in place before they even begin to outreach to the press?
Absolutely, and thank you for that intro. And having private aviation and ultra premium tequila and now luxury watches certainly helps make me look good for getting a lot of press. It's easier than selling certain products or services that may be a little less compelling at first blush. But really, to your question, my experience has been that you have to have the goods. Most people, for any entrepreneur, when you first start talking about it, especially if you are innovating and you're doing something no one's done before, most people won't get it. They're visual learners. They have to see it and you have to exist. So when you are going and pitching a story, in addition to having great press materials, you want to be able to make it tangible. And whether that's user stories, whether that's your web, your app, it's something to the extent that you can tell the story and help the reporter, whoever's doing the coverage, visualize it, you are infinitely further along than just trying to just tell them the tale and have them picture it in their head, because people don't see your vision like you do and like you will. And that also speaks to the timing. You can be way too soon in pitching something. You're better off in most instances with a launch being launched and or at least having tested before you get that press, because you can't be brand new and get that press twice, and you want to be ready for it and take advantage of it when it comes.
Cari, does that resonate with you in terms of how you work with your clients and what you tell them to, is there a minimum they have to have in place before you're willing to engage with them? And if not, what do you put in place?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that for me to work with a client, they need to have a strong point of view. And in order to have that strong point of view, they need to be out in the market long enough to really understand what's working and why it matters. So I would say, in addition to what Randy is talking about sort of the goods, like that's the first piece, that you have something that's really interesting and compelling, but so much about, once you do that launch and everyone knows that you're new and you're exciting, in order to stay relevant, which is really the goal, it's not just to be one and then, that's the end. You have to really, you have to have a point of view that's consistent about what you're doing in the market and how it compares to what everyone else is doing and why it's better, and then how you can show it. Because I think, that, like Randy's saying, takes it away from this concept of it's such a great idea to we actually can prove that people are excited about this and this matters.
Reza, are they right? Since they have to pitch you?
Yeah, I would certainly agree with the fact that, I think later is better. The product needs to definitely be out in the market. The website has to be live. There has to be something tangible, like Randy said, so that we can kind of sink our teeth into. And as we're doing our due diligence, as exploring whether we want to cover the story or not, that we have something to go by, that there's a story there, and, there's something interesting. A lot of founders come in at the early stage and they think getting press is this sort of holy grail for, user acquisition. And that's not necessarily the case. It's like, you need to have something that people want to write about. And,
absolutely.
And in the early stages, that's not necessarily there, as the startup's sort of figuring out not only their press and marketing strategy, but oftentimes figuring out the market itself.
And so, Randy, go ahead, please.
The only thing I would jump in with is, excelling at marketing involves pushing a lot of levers, paid, earned media, you name it. There's so many that we won't get into, but at least in my experience, the one that moves the needle the most is earned media, is press. And, especially that which speaks specifically about your product or service, its benefits, and reaches your target audience. So it's not, those who've already dialed into this webinar already understand its importance, but I can't overemphasize that in our entire marketing mix, this drives the engine.
Which I think, and earned media, while one of the more valuable ones, also might be one of the more difficult ones, right? It's easy to press a button and pay for something, and you can pay per click, and that you can just replicate over and over again. But earned media, tremendously difficult. And I think that a lot of that comes from the relationships that you have with certain members of the media, and Reza, that you have with different companies. So I'd love to understand, in terms of building those relationships and building the lists a founder needs to identify the right media to outreach. Cari, how do you recommend going about, not spray and pray, and being focused in on the right media for your company?
Google Alerts. It's literally, honestly, it's so simple. Like, who's covering your space? And what are they saying? Like, do you have competitors? Are there, kind of general themes or keywords? And literally by hand, and I have all the tools and all the subscriptions and all the monitoring services, but at the end of the day, really monitoring what people are writing about and what's their point of view, so that when you do go to them and you could say, you wrote about this, and I think you might find it interesting that my client or my company, is in the space too, and this is what they think. This is one of those areas where you really have to put in the work and be smart and read a lot. It's still the best way.
Reza, do you get a lot of, Randy, go ahead.
Sorry, Reza, but the one thing I would jump on that, the preparation is hugely important, but a lot of times, especially when your first forays with the media, you're going to be so nervous and focused on the message you want to get across that you may, whether it's an in-person meeting or on the phone, you're apt to forget that you're talking to a person. And I kick off every conversation, except obviously, if I'm on TV where you don't have time for small talk, but engage the person on a human level and get to know the person and where are they from and points in common. Because at the end of the day, it's a job. Yes, we're all doing our jobs, but theoretically everyone enjoys what they do. And part of what we enjoy is getting to know and work with great people. And so I think getting right to, here's my company and here's why it's great, and ignoring the, hey, how are you? And making some personal connections is missing a very important element that, maybe it's a little bit around the margin, but the margin makes a difference between a good and a great story.
Now, relationships, Reza, with the founders, with people who are, of course, trying to get you to cover what they're doing. How do you, I guess authenticity in relationships has got to be tremendously important for you, right? Obviously, you're covering stuff and you do so because it's interesting, but you're also building relationships. Like, you may love me, but you may not always carry my story, which is true, by the way.
Yeah.
So from that personal standpoint, how do you see that media outreach being more effective for the founders? And Alex, welcome. It looks like things are working for you now.
They're not working well. I think I'm going to turn off my video because this app keeps crashing for me, and just go by audio. I think that'll keep working. So I'm going to be here, but I'm just going to turn off the video before this crashes for the first time. Okay? Sorry about that.
Yeah. Reza.
So, from the relationship building standpoint, it's certainly a process. We've become, a bit transactional in our correspondences with members of startups as well as members of PR teams, because at the end of the day, it's, we're working and, we don't have time to build rapport with so many people. So inviting, us out to coffee, there's only 24 hours in the day. If, I took a request to have coffee because someone wants to build a rapport, because 3 months later, they're thinking about, doing some sort of launch or some story, we find that very difficult to manage the time process. We're a lean team. Some other organizations are sort of capable of doing that, but we do want to see that human element that, Randy had mentioned, that it's just not like you need to cover my startup. And we read sort of every pitch. We may or may not respond. We kind of keep it on file internally that, hey, we're working on something down the line. This would be a good fit at that time. But, understanding and, being cognizant of, the reporter's time, the journalist's time, the editorial staff's time is really critical. Oftentimes people continuously email back and, you didn't respond. Maybe it just wasn't a fit at that time. But, we've done stories 3, 6 months, a year later on companies that we saw maybe it was too early at the time. We try to provide as much feedback as possible, but sometimes it's just not possible due to the volume of sort of inquiries that come in on a daily basis.
And if I could just add one thing, I think absolutely, Randy and Reza, you make a great point about, kind of how you're conducting yourself once you're engaging with media. But I think, Seth, to your question about how are you getting in the front of the right people? And I think that is before you can even get into that conversation about, having that authentic moment, you have to be in front of the right people where they find your outreach to be valuable. And that gets back to how do you find those people? And doing really, really interesting and insightful industry research, I found, is the way that you really can make sure that you're not coming to someone who covers enterprise, or you're not coming to someone who covers AI and you're giving them a story about, data analytics, So I think that there's that front end prep piece before you can sort of get in the room to maximize the ongoing relationship.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. We get, we're a New York focused publication, but we have startups from all over the world pitching us, and we have just a very simple canned response like, this is not suitable for editorial because you're not a New York company. Right. Just having an office at WeWork doesn't make you a New York company either. We want to see that the founder's in New York and, there's some established presence and there's a commitment to the ecosystem here, not you've built a satellite sales office here.
So let's reverse it for a quick second there. And I'd love to get Alex, hopefully we can hear you, your point of view on this. We've talked a lot about how founders find you, right? But how do you find, as the media, how do you find stories? It's not all reactionary to people sending you press releases or blind emails introducing themselves and saying, I have a great thing that you should write about. You're on the lookout for great stories as well. How do you identify interesting startups or interesting founders on which to build great stories?
Well, I think we have to trust our network just as much as you guys try to look for connections back to us. So most of my best stories come from referrals from people I've already written about in the past, or sources who I know saying, hey, did you hear about blah, blah, blah? And I say, absolutely not. Please tell me what I'm missing here. Or, hey, this company just hit a cool milestone, but they've never talked to the press before. You seem like, you might be a good fit for them. Would you be open to an introduction? So for me, it's usually high level introductions, or sort of, 1 degree of connection, contacts like that.
Reza, same for you?
We're a little bit different. We try not to sort of chase the news, but one of the things that we do is we want to really be cognizant of the companies that are getting funding. So we have a number of services that we subscribe to that just give us alerts on, this company picked up capital, is based in New York, is in a space that we're interested in. So we'll do some outreach in that sort of end. From time to time, we'll look at companies that have recently launched similar type services that we monitor to see this company was established. We kind of look at what the business is doing. But a lot of the stuff, when we're going into sort of deep industry expertise, we have a pretty reliable network of people that are in the ecosystem, whether it's founders, VCs, that we go to and say, hey, we're doing a story in healthcare. We don't really have that much expertise. We'd like to, gain some information. Do you have some people that we can speak with? In addition to that, we've also really built some technology to leverage this. So, recently we ran a list of movers and shakers in fintech in New York, and, our expertise in the fintech space is somewhat limited. We know some of the people, but we don't know all of them. We actually just made that an open call, promoted it through AlleyWatch, built a website with a type form, and say, this is sort of an open nomination. And that really helped us, get in front of some key people that we wanted to chat with. And then, they referred a number of people as well. So it has this sort of network effect.
Cari, what's a good inbound strategy? How do you get the media reaching out to you about your clients versus constantly proactively trying to get the media to respond to something?
I think it takes time. I think I don't think it's something where there's an immediate kind of one quick hit there. I mean, it really takes time. The goal is, I think, like Alex referenced, to be on the radar of enough people so that it's coming back to you. That said, how can you be on the radar of a lot of people? I think there's a lot at the earlier stages you could do through content. I think, a lot of outlets take contributed content, which is a great opportunity to share your point of view, share data, share trends. That's really a good place to focus in on the earlier days when you're kind of doing all these other things like building the right relationships and pitching. Things like LinkedIn Pulse and Medium are really, really great for being kind of discoverable by people in your network with your point of view, to kind of give people something to share around. So I would say that, that's something to invest in early while you're kind of waiting and actively trying to make the PR machine work. Content is something that you can really flip the switch on and do that quickly.
Randy, content. What role does that play for you guys? And again, knowing that your products are super cool and awesome and people want to hear about them on a regular basis, I know that at some point you still have to be much more proactive. So what role does content play for you guys, and what's been effective?
So, I mean, it's echoing a lot of what we've heard. For us, it's actually finding the right balance, because our products and what I've been associated with are super cool and awesome. We've been offered, opportunities to do monthly or quarterly columns and things of that nature. And sometimes you actually have to say no when you know that you can't give someone enough content to meet their endless appetite, and or set a realistic expectation. But as a general rule, I mean, that's the exception, not the rule, and probably a high-class problem. As a general rule, if you have knowledge, information, things that are sexy or desirable or interesting, get it out there. And whether it's via social media, whether it's via white papers, whether it's via articles that you're drafting, put it out, or at least some element of it, in a form that works best to convey that message. There's countless different mediums with which to do so, and that will catch the attention of the folks who write about your world and lead to follow-up questions and or a different spin and or an article. So without question, if you're having a hard time, poll and start pushing and see where it takes you.
Also, one thing, Seth, I do want to just differentiate. I think with B2B and B2C, or even straight C, consumer, the role of content can be really different. I think with B2B, having that content as a filler and that point of view is something that is really an important driver. I think, with B2C a little bit, kind of consumer products, I would say content might mean something different. It might mean, things that are more visual or video as opposed to written, thoughtful pieces about industry trends. So I think there's also that piece of like looking at the business, how much kind of an industry point of view matters, where that is in your marketing kind of focus.
Got it. So Reza, how do I get a guest column in AlleyWatch? If I'm a founder and I've got a lot to share, not necessarily about my product or my company, but about the industry, and I've got some expertise that I think is worthwhile. How do I go about securing an opportunity like that with you, where you trust in my writing ability enough and my expertise enough that I become an AlleyWatch regular?
Yeah, so we've built a platform now that has 1,700 individual contributors, ranging from people that have, domain expertise on, a number of different topics, people covering different industries. And it's very simple for us. We have alleywatch.com/guest. You go onto that link. There's a number of guidelines that we have, and you submit the piece. We prefer not to really go into, getting into the mechanics of doing a lot of pre-work. We would rather see the piece completed and then say yes or no. And most of the time it's yes. The things that we're just sort of cognizant about are, does this read as marketing copy? Should this really be advertorial? But other than that, if you're, sharing something that's not overtly promotional, we're happy to sort of cover it. One of the things that you guys had, mentioned with content, one of the nice things is if you're writing about something that's industry oriented, it's pretty evergreen for the most part if the industry is not changing that fast. So we'll continue to push this out to our audience for months. So, if you're writing about a launch, we're going to cover that once and maybe promote it for a week. But if you're writing about trends that are happening in mobile, that might be good for the next 6 to 8 months. So you have this sort of, exposure in perpetuity. The process for us is very easy. Just go onto the website, submit a link to your content or upload a doc, and that's it. So we don't really, go through the process of kind of just formulating and working on a thing. We get a lot of inbound sort of requests that way, and we just defer them to the website.
Got it. Alex, does Forbes allow for guest writers like that? And if so, how do our founders go about getting noticed?
We do allow guest writers, but it's difficult because most pitches are too self-promotional. We need someone who has clear domain expertise talking about trends that are not convenient to their business. So if you have a unique perspective and you have something controversial or novel to say on a sort of much bigger topic than maybe the size of your own company, that's relevant. But too often we get sort of either people who are relative unknowns in a space trying to weigh in on Apple, and we could have thousands of people weigh in on Apple. We don't need necessarily another person to weigh in on Apple. So or they're saying, oh, AI is the next big thing, and check out my AI company. So you have to kind of be careful what you're bringing to the table.
Got it. Cari, how do you? This is I think core to what you do as a firm in terms of developing thought leadership on behalf of, or frankly, turning your clients into thought leaders and experts. What do you go about in terms of process, in terms of allowing them to be more noticed as experts and thought leaders in the field?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them, look, it's what they're doing, right? Like they truly are innovators. They truly, they truly are moving the market. It's just a question of, and they have strong points of view about how they're doing it. It's just a question of how it is that we can help to amplify that. Data is really great. Anything that they're noticing in terms of, like Alex said, trends that extend beyond just what they're seeing at their company. Reaction to what's going on in the news. That's actually something also which I think passes that test of, this is just my opinion because it's my opinion about what my customers think, versus this is my opinion because it's what's going on. For example, to get really concrete, I mean, lots of people right now are weighing in on what the election does or doesn't mean for business. And, there are, without getting into that, there are moments like that, all the time, especially industry, new companies are funded or go, public, or regulations are passed. So helping people to kind of amplify that point of view, I think is really important. And it's what helps kind of sustain beyond that one time we launched or we were funded sort of point of view.
Got it. So shifting gears a little bit from content and thought leadership, let's have a little fun and give Reza and Alex an opportunity to share with the audience what not to do. We've talked a lot about the things to do. I'd love it if both of you, frankly, could share with us maybe a short horror story about somebody who tried to make something happen with you in the absolute worst way possible. But more importantly, what are the common mistakes you see happening when founders are trying to get themselves covered? Alex, I'll start with you.
Well, I think the worst thing to do is to sort of veer on stalkering or harassment. I've gotten direct messages on Instagram, which is a little too much. I've gotten sort of incessant tweets, just like notice me, notice me, notice me, notice me. I try to tell founders, like, imagine if you were walking down the street, and just waving in someone's face for a block, and they finally turn around to talk to you, they're probably not going to be super receptive to what you have to say. So if you're doing that digitally, it's a bad sign. I think the Instagram, the sort of commenting on my last few photos on Instagram in my personal life about your app, that was the low point for me.
And again, I can't say it enough. I'm sorry for doing that. Reza, what about you?
I think the key sort of lesson is just don't be annoying in any sort of facet of the word. We've had instances where, I was a young founder and the kid was in college, and he had emailed me and I said, okay, I'm happy to chat with you on Friday, and like sent me a calendar request, not like confirming a time for Friday. And then said, I happen to be by your office right now. Do you mind if I stop by? Before I even had a chance to respond, the kid was in my office. And I'm like, this is just, not socially acceptable. So just don't be annoying. Really understand, what the focus is. Be cognizant of people's time. We want to write about companies at the end of the day. It's not that, we get off on saying no, but just doing it in sort of a mindful and considerate manner, at the end of the day. And if we do say no, follow up casually, similar to like, if you're keeping up with a VC and VC passes on your investment, send an update from time to time showing, this is what we've accomplished. But don't send me, this also happens in the case where we do pieces on companies and say, one of the contents was, the company has increased 200%, and then they get to 300% and they email you again asking for another story a week later. It's not mindful of people's time. So that's, I think, the biggest sort of thing. Don't be annoying and be mindful.
Can I hop in with a question?
I wish you would, because I can't wait to hear knowing how awesome you've been over the years, where you made a mistake and might have stumbled, because I never saw it.
Well, I appreciate that. First, I had a question, and then I'll get down on the couch and tell you the many mistakes I've made.
Thank you.
Alex and Reza, I know, especially if I was involved in launches that were maybe a little more complicated or nuanced, I was always hypersensitive to fact checking and just making sure that what I was articulating was being understood and would be properly written about by the reporter. And I know that sometimes there are certain policies where you're not allowed to give even an element of an answer or an element of a story out to, the object of that story beforehand. And so there's rules that you just can't get around. But other times, I know depending on how felt like I asked it, the reporter was immediately defensive and didn't want to, share anything in advance. And there's plenty of instances where they're like, yeah, no problem, and they send it along. So is there a right or a wrong way to ask about fact checking?
From our perspective, we're of the latter party, I guess, in the sense that we don't send anything out prior to, because it just creates a bottleneck in the process of the back and forth. And, we're on deadlines. But, a lot of what we sort of publish is in Q&A format, and a lot of it's actually written by, the person that we're interviewing. So in that sense, there should not be anything, erroneous there. In the cases where we do some, coverage of, say, events and stuff like that, we might just kind of float it by the event organizer, being, because events happen so quickly, we're able to kind of scramble things down so quickly that, we do make mistakes there. So in those cases where there's maybe a high likelihood of us making an error, then, we'll send it out first. In other cases, we're pretty quick on, correcting things if, our reporter did not, realize or understand, the messaging as the same as, it was presented.
Thank you.
So something that's coming up from the audience, actually, and a word that's been used quite frequently in today's discussion is launch. Launch seems to be a very important time for companies of all kinds to be reaching out to the media, right? There's something to be said for being in there as often as you possibly can, but those important milestones like launches are something I think everybody that's listening in today can really relate to. So, Cari, I'm going to direct this one to you. In terms of preparing for a launch, right, and getting all of those ducks in a row, your social media, your newsletter, and all the other, writing your press releases, putting those in place, your blog, whatever the case may be. What is the right amount of preparation? And the second part of that question for me is, how do you set proper goals and objectives when it comes to understanding whether or not it was a successful launch?
So I'm actually going to kick this one to Randy in a moment, because I work with clients when they're post-launch, for the point of view, from that reason of the clients I work with are in the market, they have traction, they want to kind of go to the next level, putting on the hat of when I was on the startup side and getting ready for launch. I mean, the right amounts of preparation was just, we did everything that we, could to get, to a really successful, noticeable launch. But in terms of a more scientific way, I think Randy is probably closer to what that looks like.
Randy, you've launched a few companies.
I have. Again, there's probably difference in B2B versus B2C, but in my experience, whether it's soft launch or beta or whatever, your world is where you call it, I think that there's what you call the launch, and then there's the practical matter of when you first flip the switch. And generally, the launch with the press shouldn't be the first time you flip the switch. It should be when you're ready to be officially out there and a living, breathing thing, because the opportunities for things to not go exactly as planned are too high elsewhere when you don't do it that way. As far as what are you using the press for? If it's just for exposure, if it's just for branding or definition versus if it's for generating lead flow, I think also makes a difference of who you're pitching and when and how to utilize it. Because some launch stories are just, hey, we exist, and others are the impact on the marketplace or what you're going after, or I personally like how best you are servicing the market because you exist. So I think that having thought through not only your business and what it is that you're launching, but what that key story or stories are and who's the right person to tell them makes for the difference between a successful launch and an average launch.
Alex, I got to imagine that plenty of people want you to cover when they're launching something. Are launches interesting to you? Do you want to get a press release about it? what would be the best way as a founder to turn what I think is the most important thing in the entire world into something that's of interest to you and probably more importantly to your audience?
Launches are not inherently exciting to the outside world as much as they are to the people launching them. That's just a reality. It's like, you know, you care about your baby more than other people care about your baby. But they're a time peg to look into what you're doing if it's really new and exciting. So I think if there's interest separately in the space, then a launch might be a good moment to talk about things. But I'd say the majority of launch pitches we get, the company still feels too early, or it's hype that the company is announcing, not hype that's proven by anyone else. And so we take that with a really heavy dose of salt.
Got it. And Cari, I'm going to go back to you again, even though I know launching isn't necessarily right in your wheelhouse, but a lot of people default to a press release. Right. A lot of people say, I'm going to announce something. I better write a press release and put it out there, whether it's over one of the wires or individually to reporters or journalists, excuse me. Is the press release the right first thing to put out there to generate attention? And if not, what is?
So I think this is what I think is valuable about a press release. I think the exercise of going through drafting a press release requires a company to all come together and really, really focus on how they are talking about their product, their launch, the people involved. Like the exercise of those 400 words, I think is very, very valuable. So for that reason, I still like to have a press release. I think when journalists are writing, they will say, do you have a press release? So in those two ways, I think it's important. Does the act of putting out a press release actually do anything? I don't think it does anything, except for maybe a little bit of SEO and some inbound links. I think that it is still, for a company that was trying to do it on their own and they're launching and they're trying to create noise, a press release is also a shareable document to get others excited that you and your team have now spent a lot of time poring over every single word. So I think, again, there's value in that. Beyond that, should someone put it out on PR Web or MarketWire and think that people are calling them? No, absolutely not. Is it necessary to create excitement? Absolutely not. You can write a great blog post, frankly, and that same blog post, you're not going to share it with a journalist, but you can write a great blog post and be as impactful about, we launched and we're excited, and this is in some ways back to Randy's earlier point about sort of authenticity and storytelling. That blog post or something visual might be more exciting at the beginning. And I think as Alex said, who really cares about a launch? The founders really, really do, and the people around the table do. But Alex sees lots of launches all the time. In the beginning, the people who care are the network of the people of that company. So whatever you can give them to get them excited and share and talk about, that's what I think is where you're going to get the most early traction.
Got it. You mentioned a few subscription platforms and we're pretty vehement about don't do that. Are there subscriptions tools or platforms that you would recommend for those founders that are doing self-serve media and self-serve public relations?
I wouldn't. I really think that you still can find everything by reading what the journalists are writing and by finding, email addresses that are usually available kind of online. Sure. I wouldn't say subscribe, in the earliest days to subscribe to Cision for thousands of dollars to get contact information that may or may not be out of date anyway, as opposed to just really tracking the space is just the best. It really is the best way. I think that just kind of coming up and taking a look at who your competitors are, who's writing about them, the keywords of this space, start to develop your own spreadsheet. This writer wrote about this thing. I really think that's the place to start.
Reza, are events a good way to get your attention? Inviting you to them to cover, whether it's a launch or otherwise, versus, just an email with, can you write about my company? Do you go to events when invited? and how does the physicality of that sort of experience impact your interest?
It's an interesting question because we do go to events and cover them, but we'll tend to cover more sort of thought leadership type panels. So if you're on the panel, we're going to provide some coverage. It's not an in-depth sort of story on something, but like, you know, our company might write something similar to a webinar like this. So, you know, everyone will get some exposure, but that wasn't really the focal point, was to write about anyone's company or what they do. It was just more kind of, you know, this is what happened. You know, one of the interesting things with sort of tech is there's a blur between sort of professional and personal life, and social sort of melds in. And I don't want to like go to an event and then, you know, have a beer with someone and then they think we're best friends, and then the next week they want me to write about their company, and then the next month they want to. So, you know, just kind of being mindful of how people are. It's like, you know, I'm there professionally, we can have a beer, but that doesn't mean I owe you anything or I want to write about your company. But it's a great way to get, you know, participating in panels and, you know, hosting events is a great way to sort of get on the radar, because, you know, companies, you know, people are on the lookout for different, you know, companies to write about. And that's sort of an efficient way when you get 200-300 people in the room. It's like, hey, this company's doing something cool. So we'll go to, you know, companies where, you know, a lot of companies are exhibiting, they have booths, startups, similar to like Tech Day in New York or Tech Week. When we know there's 200-300 companies, we can just kind of very quickly and also non-intrusively and passively kind of see what this company's up to, get their contact information, and then do our diligence and being like, hey, we're going to reach out to them because we think this is a cool company.
I would say, you know, being a good person and having people know who you are as a person has a lot of value. So having a beer with someone and connecting with them just sort of face to face is really valuable if you understand that and do it the right way. Like Reza's saying, I think, you know, then expecting a guarantee of coverage and kind of pressuring someone after that, you squander that sort of personal capital. But I do think that there is some basic value in that.
Randy, experiential for you. I can say I've been to at least one of your events. What role does that play? How effective has that been? And is it a continued part of your PR strategy?
Well, first, let me segue off of what Reza and Alex said. You know, I speak in a lot of analogies, and, you know, building a relationship with the press or getting someone to write about you is not dissimilar to, you know, being single and trying to get someone interested in you. You know, one way is to go right up to them and strike up a conversation. The other way is to appear to be a person of interest in the room and to have others talking about you. So if you're at an event and you know there's press there, yes, it's worthwhile, especially if we have a relationship, to make that connection and say hello. But they're going to be much more compelled by the fact that everyone seems to want to talk to you, and or others, even not in your earshot, are talking about you or your business and or your launch. So I think be mindful of that sometimes the best way to someone isn't direct. It's through the crowd or through their ecosystem that matters. Vis-a-vis our own personal events, sometimes it's a double-edged sword, because there are plenty of times where if you're throwing an amazing event that's going to attract the right crowd and have them interested and excited, then it's great. It's easy in that context to get the press excited. But, you know, I've been a part of, you know, private aviation. The word private is paramount. And we've had the element where press that were invited to cover the event start getting personal with some of our members who don't want it per se covered, that they were flying privately or were in that room. So depending on who your audience is and what's going on with your event, you do sometimes have to consider, is it appropriate or not to have a reporter here interacting with the others in the room, and or lay out the ground rules in advance. And most media are okay with that. Most attendees are okay with that, as long as everyone knows what's happening.
Got it. Cari, anything to add in terms of experiential or events as part of the PR strategy?
No, I think they covered it. I mean, our experience, we find it's challenging. Reporters are busy people. So I never encourage clients to rely too heavily on events.
Reza, how important is exclusivity to you when getting an opportunity to cover something? And do you do follow-on coverage that you see in other publications or websites?
I'm probably of a different mindset. I don't really care about exclusives. Embargoes, I think, are also a bit obsolete. It's not sort of cognizant of the modern era. 20 years ago, if I'm a publication, I'm in print and I get an exclusive, I'm going to have, everyone that wants to read the story has to go out and buy this sort of paper, my paper, if they want to read it first. Whereas now in the information age and technology, if I write a story and I have an exclusive, within 15 minutes, another publication, not Forbes, has rewritten the story. So that doesn't really matter to me. We don't chase news in that sense. What we actually like to do is wait 3 or 4 days after this sort of embargo launch or whatever sort of manufactured event has happened, and then get the story out, because then I tend to be in Google News longer, from a long tail sort of perspective. So, we capitalize on the traffic there rather than try to fight much larger publications in Google News for 15 minutes. It's not really worth it for us.
Alex, what about you? Exclusivity.
Exclusivity is a big deal. It can be the difference between me covering or not if it's something that is sort of a fringe name recognition to our audience otherwise. I hate being one of a crowd. I hate writing the same story as 12 other people. That no reporter goes into the business to be a transcriber of the same things. So, I think embargoes that are not exclusive, I usually don't do these days. So an exclusive at least gives it another reason for me to look at it.
Cari, do you see that a lot with your clients? Are you working to build exclusive stories with particular publishers or journalists, or is it more about mass attention across multiple platforms?
I think they're two separate things, and I find that they're both still important. So I think exclusive is still important. Certain outlets, certain reporters, like Alex said, really want them, and they want to build that relationship based on being kind of the first one to break news. So I do think that's important. Embargoes, I think from a date perspective, are still important, because from a company's perspective, sometimes there's a business reason why they can only announce certain news on a certain day. And that is still an important timeline just to respect. I think embargoes still do matter, and those date timelines still do matter on the company side. I guess on the other way to look at it is that a company can not go to the press until they're willing to have, the exact moment they reach out, that news, could appear in print. But I think those two pieces are still really important.
I think I would disagree from sort of the embargo standpoint.
Conflict. All right. Let's go.
Just because from our sort of, perception, a lot of times there's embargo associated with news that's not really time sensitive at all. It's like, I understand you have a key partnership, you can't announce it till a certain day, but 90% of the embargoes that we get have really nothing to do other than the fact that this is sort of an effort for the company and the PR team, usually to manage their outreach in one sort of shift or within a couple of days. So it's easier from a planning perspective, I think, for you guys to do that. But I don't know if it makes any sense, or this news is so noteworthy that it has to come out on this specific day.
The point is,
I can't speak. Go ahead, Randy.
The point is, don't create false exclusivity or false deadlines. Not that an embargo around a real deadline or real situation is per se, there's nothing negative about it. It's the false ones ring as particularly annoying.
Well, also, if it's going to be an exclusive, make it a real exclusive. Like, empower the reporter. If you come to me and say, "Here's an exclusive, but we're going with it. We're announcing it at 9 a.m. tomorrow." Clearly you don't care that much about my coverage, or you would ask me what is a good time for me, right? You're going at 9 a.m. because your marketing strategy says you should go at 9 a.m. and I'm a piece of your marketing strategy. And no reporter wants to be part of the sausage making that explicitly.
You get?
You were going to say something?
I cannot speak for the pitches that Alex or Reza receive. I can't speak for that, but yes, I mean, those are definitely great points, that if you're doing it just as a tactic to kind of like try and strong arm someone, like this has to happen, you know, at a certain point, or like you said, Alex, it's not, I really want to work with you. It's just, I'm looking for someone to do this before tomorrow. That is very different than, you know, again, it gets back to, there are certain people who you feel like will really do justice to a story, and you want to convey to them, like, you are one of the people who I think will do justice to this. And I think kind of the exclusive is important for that. I think, you know, and again, embargoes, false deadlines are not good, but there are reasons on a founder side. I mean, filings, or what, there are reasons why on a founder side they need to, you know, kind of get to a certain, they need to get to a certain timeline. So I do think it's important. But it is a different strategy to kind of just a blitz, like, oh, tomorrow we're just gonna push everything out. And hey, that works sometimes too. And especially in the early days, like, you have to be organic, and you want people excited, and you want that social campaign and that blog post going, and you wanna, you know, email, right? I mean, there's nothing, I wouldn't say wrong with that. It's a different tactic, but sometimes that's what's called for too, especially in the beginning when you're just building momentum and excitement.
Randy, we work with a lot of, obviously, technology startups, which don't tend to have founders that come from marketing and advertising backgrounds. You've been very successful in launching companies, especially on the side of building great momentum in the press, because that was where your corporate experience came from. My question to you is, for those who don't have that background, when's the right time to engage an agency? And, you know, what are the driving forces to say an agency is required versus to continue to do things on my own?
It's a great question. I don't think there's a one single answer, but I'd say some of the things to think about are, one, I mean, I've worked with a number of PR agencies. The one in particular, Evans, that we work with, has done a phenomenal job across numerous stops in my career, my trajectory. And so I default to, the sooner you can justify the benefits of having a good and the right agency for your company, the better. But that's only a relevant answer if PR is truly of paramount importance to your business. If it's a nice to have and not a must have, then allocate the resources that would go to that firm where they are better prioritized. I'd also say that if you are not, and it's a slight veer from your question, but related, you need to understand what is your skill set as the founder, part of the founding team, to not only go and generate that media, but then to do a successful job of telling your story. And if you are both good at identifying who, and then catching the fish, and then having them write a good story, then you can probably go it alone longer. But if there's holes in your game from that standpoint, and you know, you need to think about, one, who might be the right company spokesperson, which is a separate but related question, or at least have the right PR people holding your hand and potentially being in the room, because they'll be subtly educating you, you know, before, during, and after those initial press conversations to get you better very quickly. So I err on the side of do it as soon as possible if it's a priority for your business. But certainly there are other, you know, Maslow's hierarchy, having your business and your product in place, launched, having the necessary staff, servicing your customers comes first. But thereafter, for us, it's always been a top priority.
Cari, agencies are not necessarily a silver bullet solution to getting great media. And unfortunately, I think a lot of founders think that once they bring an agency on board, it's, whew, agency's there, I don't have to do anything anymore. They've got it. That is clearly not the case. So my question to you is, what is your expectation on the founder's side in terms of their participation once they have engaged you?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I think what's important is I actually have never spent a day in a PR agency in my life. And everything I've learned in PR has been from being on the founder side and kind of getting out there and rolling up my sleeves as a founder of a startup and kind of figuring out what works. And, you know, it was through that experience that I launched this company 5 years ago. My training is actually in law, which we could talk about the similarities between being a lawyer and being in media, and that's a whole other discussion. So I think, you know, just to kind of back up a little bit to what Randy is saying about, you know, kind of your previous question, when should you get an agency? It really depends on, as a founder, how good are you at this and how much do you like it? I loved it as a founder, obviously, since this is the company I started. So then when you bring someone in, to get to your question now, you know, can you expect that on the other side, someone's just going to take it over? I mean, I can't speak to big agencies. Like I said, I've never been there. Ultimately, I think that especially a growing tech company, you want a partner. You want someone who's excited about what you're doing, who gets what you're doing, who's bringing you ideas as much as you're bringing them ideas. It's not going to be a successful relationship if you can't devote some time and work with someone who you could bring into the fold of what your vision is, what your mission is, and what size that is. I don't know. I mean, I only know the size kind of that I work with, and we work with all size companies, but the size of my firm, which is, you know, under 5 people and will remain at under 5 people. But as a founder, I think the expectation is really that you need to look for someone who is a kind of outsourced collaborator with you.
Alex, you feel differently about getting contacted by an agency on behalf of a founder versus being contacted by a founder directly?
I think the founder directly can work if done well, and if the founder has a clear voice and is sort of, you know, seems nice and ultra lean. But I wouldn't usually advise it. I think, you know, I'd say focus on your job and what you do well, and let someone else kind of try to introduce you. But I don't know. I mean, I think the PR firms are just so broad right now. It's hard to really talk in generalities. I mean, there are more than 4 PR people for every reporter. So there's a heck of a ton of great PR people, and there's a heck of a ton of 22-year-olds who don't know what they're doing. So it really kind of depends who you're getting.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Alex just did my sales pitch for me.
Well, then you got something out of today, which I think is great.
I would absolutely echo that. Just having a good agency is the starting point and not the end point. If you don't constantly discuss what are your goals, what tools the company is giving the PR firm to work with, and then following up and making sure that they're doing it well, and then supporting them with the stories and with the press, and then thereafter digesting what came out and how do you improve it for the next time. It's like anything else. What you put in is what you get out. And, you know, otherwise it's going to go from what could be a huge help to a huge waste of money.
Got it. So we're approaching the hour mark here, and I want to be very respectful of the panelists' time, knowing that this is not the only thing you had going on today, and that you have companies to run. I want to thank you guys tremendously for providing insight. There are still more questions coming in that we didn't get a chance to get to. That perhaps after the panel today we can share with you guys and possibly get some feedback. I would ask for any parting insights or remarks that you can share with the audience, and feel free if you want to put a plug in there for yourselves as well. But I'd love to hear sort of closing comments from the group. And Cari, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, as founders, you're really excited about what you do, and it's just so important to make that enthusiasm and excitement come through. And they're really, you know, there are a lot of tools, and if you're a founder in today's tech ecosystem, you have a lot of connections, and you could get a lot done at the early days if you know, like what it took you to get your company to this point. If you approach that on the media and press side, you really can make a lot happen.
Reza?
I'll be succinct and just say, you know, build a product that people want to write about and that people want to read about. I said it earlier. And at the end of the day, you know, entrepreneurship is a tough battle. People are going to say no to press and pitches and things like that. You just have to keep plowing forward. It's nothing is sort of personal. We're running a business as well. So, you know, just build something great and people will write about it.
Randy?
So I'll raise the bar on myself, I guess, and 11 James. We have a really exciting launch coming out mid-November. It's going to double our potential market. It's going to evolve our brand in what we think is really important and exciting ways. And press is an instrumental part of this launch. So I encourage everyone who's dialed in to either say nice job or you talked it, but you didn't walk it about 2 or 3 weeks from now. So the bar is set as high as it can be, but we're excited about it.
Awesome. I'm excited to see what that is. Alex?
I would say I hope I get a really great pitch, or I hope I get a really good introduction from people who are listening in, because again, we just want to be treated like people, and I think hopefully I couldn't hold on. I'm going to try to literally put a face to the name for a second, but I think that's my biggest thing is if we don't catch. But yeah, I'm a real person, and so treat me as such, and I'll treat you the same, right?
I don't know how to top that, so I think that's where we're going to close it for today. So thank you to Cari, to Reza, to Randy, to Alex, and to everybody who tuned in to today's Dreamit Get to A webinar. This will be posted to our YouTube channel within a few days, so if there are points that you missed or you joined us late, feel free to check it out over there, as well as some of our all of our other webinars that we posted. At this point, I'm going to shut things down and reach out to everybody individually to say thank you again, but really appreciate today. I think it was tremendously helpful to the participants. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.